Thank you very much. And well, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to participate in BELF discussions, and all the more grateful for a chance to contribute to them as well. So just a few words about me, and which would probably kind of explain the my choice of the topic. Uh, Currently, I'm based in France, and I've been working mostly in university contexts. But I'm also a trainer for business clients, mostly individuals. So I'm kind of in between the two worlds, let's say, which probably, kind of explains why I would like to talk about a research article, which is which is kind of practical. And over the recent sessions, we've talked about the ways to kind of bridge that gap between really practice and theory, and how we could, in fact, bridge that gap and maybe talk about some, I don't know, do's and don'ts and some tweaks that we could do for our specific contexts. And for that reason, today I'm going to talk about a research article which is quite recent, and I hope that you can see my screen. Great. Yeah. This is a recent article based on a project-based course, in fact, a course in business English. A course that was held at the university. So I'll just start with the project setup, I guess. So as you can see, this course took 15 weeks. It was held at a university in Vietnam, and 10 weeks were dedicated to the language input, which was based on the market leader, the intermediate level, which we're probably all familiar with, plus 5 weeks of project work. The participants included 30 B2 level students at a university in Vietnam, as I said. And the interviews involved 5 students and their lecturer. 5 students meaning representatives from each of the groups potentially that are working on those projects. Talking about, my slides do not change. Yeah. Talking about the research questions, those were the 2 questions that guided this piece of research, namely how PBL is implemented in an English for Business course, and what are the benefits both for teachers and learners in terms of personal, professional, and social development within this course. And we will see how that worked out. I would like also to mention that it's a qualitative study. So yeah, again, so one of the things that could be considered as maybe benefits and maybe somehow disadvantages as well. As the theoretical framework for the study, the author chose, the general PBL cycle, which is the preparation stage, information gathering, and the presentation and reflection on the project. The author also emphasized the experiential basis of project-based learning, which was really important from the point of view of interaction both in between lecturers, students, of course, peers, students with their peers and with their group mates, and also interestingly business agents, because the students were encouraged to interact with local businesses as they were developing a business plan for their own business, in fact. And within the framework of the study, the students were instructed to produce a business plan for a company of their choice, which would include, all of the points that you can see on the slide. What is kind of interesting, we cannot see in the article the pedagogical aims of the lecturer and potentially the researcher as well, which could probably somehow explain why we do not see as much of BELF coming through. Because we do not see any aims related to language or related to even the business content and the way the project was supposed to be finalized, let's say. However, the research and, well, the projects themselves, they were evidently based and mostly focused on the content, in fact, because as you can see on the slide, well, these are just some extracts of the tables provided by the researcher. So as you can see, the students chose to create plans for those various companies. Yeah, an English language center, a flower shop, a restaurant, a tourist company, and a fashion shop. And in terms of BELF, interestingly, in some of these projects, we can clearly see that they are aimed at international interactions. Like, for instance, the English Language Center. So obviously, it's supposed to provide services aimed at various students and audiences aiming to learn the language. But it's also supposed to provide consultations on studying overseas, which really requires interacting with foreign universities, for instance, and maybe some other players. Obviously, a tourist company is also involved in international interactions as well, in terms of providing, well, various tours and interacting with international visitors, just as simple as that. As a restaurant provides both Vietnamese and Western cuisines, we can also assume that it requires some degree of interaction in between cultures, although it's within the same country, but nevertheless. But we do not have any information, like any explicit information, let's say. As for the flower shop and the fashion shop, although again, if the projects are well, implemented in English, probably we can assume that they're in one way or another, they target international audiences, again, maybe within the country, but still they assume some interaction with well, foreign clients or, well, visitors to the country or whatever. However, we do understand that all the projects are really well, aimed at producing, let's say, quality content. And for that reason, well, again, this is just like the continuation of the table provided by the researcher. For that, students were supposed to work with local businesses to kind of see what kind of risks, challenges were involved in each of the businesses, what kind of solutions could be proposed. And, well, generally, they were more like industry oriented than language oriented, let's say. And, well, since again, they were supposed to just develop the plan, not, let's say, they were not able to, well, develop their business, obviously. The framework that was chosen for evaluation, it's, well, the SMART model that, well, we know quite well, and which is used in language teaching, well, as well in many fields. But well, this was the basis for the evaluation of the project content. And, well, I say that it's kind of interesting because it allows for assessing, like, essentially a plan, but also taking into account the various, well, challenges, ways to resolve them, various opportunities to see whether, like, how they kind of, well, factor into the project, the potential, let's say, project success. And by the way, well, while we have this framework for evaluation, we do not know anything basically about the linguistic component. So we do not really know how the language factors into the final grade, if it does in any way. However, well, that appears to be quite an interesting option to, well, just as students who are only working on projects and cannot see, well, the real outcomes of, well, of their ideas in the industry. Talking about the outcomes of the projects, they were mainly presented in the form of, well, their impact on personal development, professional development, and social development of students and the lecturer. I'll talk a little bit more about this as well. When it comes to personal development, the researcher mostly focused on motivation and, well, students' autonomy as well. because the lecturer could really observe that students were much more motivated to work on the projects than, for example, on their materials from the first 10 classes. And we can kind of infer from the article that in many ways, students are mostly kind of lectured, even if it's a language course. So that really impacted their motivation. And of course, students' autonomy also increased because, well, first of all, they were supposed to take responsibility for their projects, but moreover, they were working also with businesses, and they were supposed to choose, well, who to cooperate with, what kind of a business to choose, etc. What is also kind of interesting in terms of the analytical framework, which could also be considered as kind of a limitation, but nevertheless, the results of the project are kind of mixed because the researcher talks about the benefits both for the students and the lecturer. Because in fact, the lecturer as well gives some comments that are included in the article in particular, saying that he also kind of benefited from the students' projects in terms of both like personal and professional development. And this is also an interesting question because very often, well, maybe not often, but sometimes lecturers do not have enough experience in the industry. Or even if they do not know in which industry their students are going to work. And that is why that's always a challenge to really cater to their needs and prepare them, well, to their real world practices in the future. In terms of professional development, well, obviously, students mentioned a lot, well, their professional knowledge, their specialized knowledge that they gained doing those projects. They also, well, working with real businesses, so that provided them with authentic context, and they emphasized the importance of that too. And they were able to choose the fields that they were interested in, so that was kind of a benefit, both professionally and personally. But what is also interesting here in terms of, well, BELF communications, though not international ones, but still, there's all something that could be kind of projected onto their professional careers. The lecturer mentioned that it also lacked some of vocabulary, some of specialized knowledge in those fields. And during the sessions, during the classes where students were working on their projects and, well, where the lecturer was helping them to well, solve any problems or to remove any excessive information, etc. The lecturer mentioned that at that point in time, the students were able to explain him all the terms very clearly, although they were working on like very different businesses, as we've seen. One of the students also talked about the fact that they were not sure how to present the project in terms of, again, terminology. And that's why they opted out of using some strictly specialized, let's say, terms, and chose to use simpler words, as well, as you can see from the quote here, where we can really see this kind of like BELF conversations, which again, they're not really international in their essence, but in academic context, it's always, well, to an extent, it's always about modeling. So this is something that, again, kind of could be counted as a realistic practice. And going back to the social development, so the last point that was kind of mentioned here, obviously it was about links with businesses. So that part of the project was really motivating for the students, but they also emphasized that they didn't expect that businesses would be interested in cooperating with them. And some of the students were also able to continue their cooperation with those businesses beyond their university projects. And many of them were really interested in continuing to work in those fields in the future. So that kind of created links with business communities, which, well, provided again for the authenticity of this experience. Moving on to the conclusions that the researcher came to. First of all, they're quite general, and probably this is due to the fact that the research questions are kind of general, which I'll come back to that. But the researcher emphasizes primarily the impact of the voice and choice that students have in their project implementation. So he emphasizes that it's important to give students an opportunity to choose their projects, to choose, well, the topic to work on, etc. But he also stresses the need for guidance for, well, emphasizing the specific steps to take, the tasks to do, the various sources and resources that are available, both in terms of, well, literature and the specific businesses, organizations that could help with, well, with their project and somehow probably compensate for the lack of specific knowledge of the lecturer, for instance. And the last point, which is, again, kind of worth attention, because one of the conclusions was that it's necessary to encourage students to employ more ESP terms, or business-related terms, in their projects, which is sort of always a balance. Because on the one hand, in BELF, in a lot of ESP courses, we are talking about accommodating our language. And we need to kind of find, again, kind of a balance between accommodating to different audiences in terms of making our language simpler. Yeah, if we're talking to audiences that are not, like, do not have any specialization, do not have any specific knowledge in the field. But sometimes it is necessary to talk to professionals, and enhancing your level in terms of professional terminology could also, well, be seen as a sign of, well, competence in some cases. So again, probably, well, an outcome that could be, well, discussed further, depending on the context. Well, whether it is an academic context, a corporate context, how it works out in, let's say, different fields. Well, that's mainly it as for the article, and I'd like to just mention a couple of limitations that could be seen in the research setup. First of all, it's lack of experience in project-based learning. Here I'm talking about the research, sorry, not the researcher, the lecturer. The lecturer didn't have any previous experience in project-based learning, and that probably could have an impact on the setup of the project, even in terms of the pedagogical aims, yeah, that the lecturer pursued, or while, like, suggesting the students do this course and, well, do the project, in fact. And some probably that kind of impacted as well on the way BELF is represented in the article, because sometimes we can clearly see that BELF is simulated there, but it's not explicitly mentioned. It's not explicitly mentioned by the lecturer, and the students do not talk about that a lot as well. And in fact, some of the reflection that is, well, the comments, yeah, the quotes that are included in the article, they're half professional, but not always. And that's probably, again, that's something that the lecturer could clarify before, well, before starting the project, and then before starting the reflection as well. So probably that was kind of a limitation, and that's like where BELF could come through like a little bit more. The second limitation is related, in fact, to the first one. We do not have any rubrics for assessment. So we do have the SMART model, but we do not really understand how it's applied. Like, what are the specific criteria for assessment? This is one thing. We do not know how the language factors in, like we don't have any like information about that at all. And maybe that is due to the fact that the course, the project takes only part of the course. And the author says that at the last session, the lecturer was trying to explain the students the format of the exam. So probably their mark included the project, but like was not limited to that. So maybe that's like part of that. But nevertheless, we don't have any like specific rubrics and like, how that framework was applied, in fact, the SMART model. Plus the research questions, they're pretty broad, and like we cannot see any, let's say, hypothesis, any expected outcomes. So we do not really understand what was the aim, like the specific aim of the project itself, as well as the research article would require probably. And that's reflected as well in the research questions, but also partially in reflection. As we cannot see any like questionnaires, or we can understand that probably students were asked to just like generally reflect on their experience within the project, but nothing more than that, in fact. And that is why we can see that students also like somehow we can see some irrelevant information in their quotes. So probably again, this limitation somehow account for kind of the lack of BELF that was present there, and lack of maybe some kind of professional experiences that the students received, while it's just like not represented in the article directly. However, I would say that it's kind of interesting to have this kind of research. We don't have many articles available that deal with efficiency of different teaching methodologies, PBL specifically as well. And it also represents an attempt of qualitative research, which is also not really common. But it is really necessary to see how students feel, how students see these projects kind of from within. Moreover, currently, project-based learning, first of all, it's getting more and more widespread. But now project-based learning and BELF, as basically the framework for it, it's gaining importance because even recent conference that I've been to, it was revolving around translation studies, and so basically mainly the surveys, the pieces of research that were presented, they dealt with translate students in translation and interpreting and linguistics. But even there, some of the expectations that were like recurring throughout the different surveys in different countries, they mentioned that the students majoring in English or in translation, they do expect to be taught project management, because a lot of them are working in the industry, they're working in business context eventually, and the translation accounts for only part of their jobs. So I would say that really that, again, brings us to the importance of like different methodologies in BELF, and how we can basically tweak them to suit our different contexts, the different needs of our students. And basically, probably I'd like to leave you here with some like not really questions, but maybe topics for discussion. Probably the article kind of resonated differently with with all of us, just because of our different contexts. So I simply kind of singled out some areas for discussion that this research article could prompt. I do hope that I can share those in the chat box. But apart from that, thank you very much for listening. And if you allow me, I'll just stop sharing my screen to go to the topics for basically, like, I guess as we are moving to the breakout rooms, we could just share our different experiences with project-based learning, because I think that we all like have some, let's say, definitely. And as for the questions for discussion, that's not real questions, just subjects that I could suggest. Those are just the strengths and challenges of PBL in academic and corporate context, because I know that some of us are working with only students or only corporate clients. Some work with both, so that could be interesting to compare. Also, the assessment criteria in academic versus corporate context in terms of content, because we do have quite a lot of references in terms of language, but talking about content, especially in academic context, because probably in corporate context, we could, well, students can really assess themselves to a significant degree. In academic context, it is a challenge, and it is a challenge in particular because, well, the lecturers do not always have the experience in the industry, and not only for that reason. And the third part, well, basically the framework for qualitative research, but not just for research purposes, but also to see like how these projects kind of are able to produce some secondary outcomes that sometimes can become even primary in terms of group dynamics, in terms of confidence building, autonomy, well, any kind of soft skills and any project management skills, in fact. Well, anyway, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. I do hope that it was like a little bit useful, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.